Welcome to the video, guys. As you all know, the EU has been bleating on about a so-called level playing field. But much like with the possibility of us getting a Brexit in name only, this so-called level playing field would be a level playing field in name only, as The Guardian reported yesterday afternoon, with the headline, Brexit talks hit by row over EU subsidies for farmers. This is because they plan to give their farmers over in the European Union subsidies so they can undercut the British, and they're claiming we are not allowed to do anything about it if we sign up to their piss poor deal. So, as we all suspected, level playing field was never really going to be a level playing field. It would be the EU taking the piss out of us, with essentially us being the vassal state of the EU, unable to help our farmers compete with EU subsidised food that would be imported to this country, proving the EU's idea of fair and free trade differs from the rest of the world, as we already know. It's amazing how the Ramonas are nowhere to be seen on this defending the British farmers, because we all know they serve the European Union, not the country that gave them life. British and EU negotiators have hit a new obstacle to securing a trade and security deal after clashing over £70 billion worth of subsidies handed to European farmers by Brussels, The Guardian can reveal. So the EU is secretly subsidising their farmers to the tune of £70 billion, which is no small sum, I'm sure you would agree. The fact The Guardian are reporting this is rather shocking, but I'm not going to complain. The EU's negotiating team, led by Michel Barnier, was accused in the latest rounds of talks of seeking to block the government from defending British farmers from cut-price European imports. The row centres on the EU's demand for what it is claimed would be an unprecedented commitment not to retaliate through tariffs on European goods, even where it could be potentially shown that British farmers are being unfairly undercut, which I'm sure you would agree completely pisses in the face of the so-called level playing field the EU claims it wants. They want a level playing field on some things, but on others, like farming, they want an unfair advantage. The same can be said for fishing, which is why Boris Johnson needs to tell them where to go. The negotiators are set to return to the issue over the intensified summer talks starting next week, joining a long list of thorny areas where common ground is yet to be found. Well, if they continue down this route, you simply say that is the end of it, it's a no-deal Brexit, we will see you later. They can't run around screaming they want a level playing field, demanding this and that, while trying to undercut our farmers and expecting us not to do anything about it. Are they actually having a laugh? The 27 EU governments will issue a statement welcoming the new talks, scheduled to run into September, but call for businesses to be ready for all outcomes, according to a leaked paper which I actually covered yesterday. The UK's farming industry is facing the biggest shake-up in over 40 years, with the country's exit from the single market and the customs union at the end of the year. For the duration of the current parliament, farmers will be paid subsidies at the same rate as the EU, around £3 billion a year. The British government is concerned at the potential for heavily subsidised EU farmers to exploit the period of uncertainty and anxiety brought to a head by clauses contained in the European Commission's draft legal text for a future trade deal. Because if we're pumping £3 billion a year in and they want to pump in £70 billion, that is a massively disproportionate amount, meaning EU farmers will be able to heavily undercut the UK, which cannot be allowed. The government must put its foot down, end of story. Under World Trade Organization rules, there is no cap on payments to farmers that do not distort trade or, at the most, cause minimal distortion. Such unrestricted subsidies, known as green box payments, include direct income support for farmers that are not related to production levels or prices. They also include environmental protection and regional development programs. The EU has over time hugely increased the proportion of its subsidies that it regards as being green box payments, often in the face of opposition from rival producers. Because the EU doesn't give a shit, they just do what they want. They are a protectionist racket after all, looking after number one at the expense of anyone else, which is why Boris must stick to his guns and tell them to go fuck themselves. This is not going to happen. If they subsidise their farmers, we will do it in return, end of story. In 2018, the US Department of Commerce imposed a 17.13% anti-dumping duty on Spanish olives, claiming that they were being sold at unfairly low prices as a consequence of green box payments. Two clauses in the EU's proposed free trade deal with the UK would have both sides agree that such funds are not in effect effect price distorting and cannot be counted with anti-subsidy proceedings, nor be subjected to price or cost adjustments in anti-dumping investigations. This to me says the EU knows this is some shifty shit and are trying to protect themselves from possibly being called out for it later down the line when they possibly plan to start doing this sneaky shit. What a dirty snivelling bunch of shit weasels the EU really is, which, to be honest, is something we all knew anyway. The UK negotiating team, led by David Frost, has in response argued that such a clause would limit the government's ability to protect the British farming industry, which is kind of obvious. The EU has previously sought to have similar provisions, known as a peace clause by trade experts, inserted into prospective trade deals with Australia and New Zealand, but they do not exist in any current agreements because obviously those nations told them where to go, as should the UK. End of story. Maria Wigglefale, a researcher on trade for Oxfam in Germany, who has studied the potential price distorting impact of the EU Green Box payment, said there is no reason why there should be an external peace clause for the EU, because obviously there shouldn't. But I think you would all agree this article here has exposed the EU for the complete and utter piss takers that they really are, screaming about level playing field this and level playing field that, how the UK can't undercut them, while they backhandedly try to undercut our farmers and put in clauses where we can't do anything about it. As I said, a bunch of snivelling shitweasels. I think you would agree. The more time goes on, the more evidence we get that Boris Johnson needs to sack the trade deal and just get on with taking us out on a WTO Brexit. The EU are clearly trying to piss in our pockets and tell us it's raining. We cannot be allowing this to happen. End of story. The Tories have an 80-seat majority. It's about time they started acting like it, because they are certainly not doing that in a majority of the things that we have seen over the last few months and weeks. It seems to me they are still acting like we are living under a hung parliament and they have to be worried about what is going on when they really don't. The EU have shown themselves to be trying to take our money, take our fish, and now taking away the ability of our farmers to earn a living by subsidising EU farmers so they can flood this market with their crap, which we don't want. You can tell that by the fact they had to sneak the clauses in without just saying it out and out. These were added in as a little sly one, as this Guardian article pointed out. Now, as always, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and my other social media links are down in the video description if you want to come and support me on Twitter, BitChute, and a variety of other platforms, including my second YouTube channel. As I said, all links are down in the video description.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.